Welcome to Chef Hacker Kitchen. Please go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons. It costs you nothing and it really does help us to continue to provide these videos. Prime rib of beef. What a wonderful dish to serve to guests who come into your home for a holiday or other dinner party. But a lot of folks are a little bit intimidated at the thought of cooking this cut. Can't really blame them. It's among the largest roast a home cook ever makes. It's rather expensive, and prime rib is not as forgiving as, say, turkey or ham. However, thanks to its inherent juiciness and flavor, any home cook can get wonderful results from prime rib by just using a little bit of planning and following just a couple of techniques. And we're going to show you those techniques right now. So let's get started. Now here's our prime rib. This is exactly as it came from the supermarket. Some people say you probably ought to go ahead and expose the bones by cutting this off. It's sort of a more elegant look. And then they also often suggest that you trim some of the fat cap on top. I don't do that. I like to leave the cap intact, and this as well. I feel that that fat, to some extent, will basically baste the meat while it cooks. Moisture is the enemy of crispness. So what I like to do is I like to take several tablespoons of salt, and I go ahead and apply that over the top of the meat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this exposed for at least several hours, and actually I'm going to do it overnight. You could do this up to about 12 or maybe even 24 hours in advance. And again, I leave it exposed in the refrigerator so that the salt will draw the moisture out of the meat. Okay, so into the fridge it goes, and we'll pick this up in the morning. Okay, so our roast has been chilling in the refrigerator overnight, and as you can see, the salt has done its job and a lot of the moisture has been removed. So we're about ready to go with this. First thing we're going to do is get a pan big enough to hold our roast, and normally we could just transfer this right to the pan and start cooking, but I'm going to make some julienne to go with this so we can serve it au jus. And to help with that, I'm going to take some onion trimmings, which is, if you watch this YouTube channel, you know that every time I trim onion, I save the bits that I don't use for the project in the freezer, and then when I make soup stocks and sauces, they are ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put them on the bottom of my pan. They'll get nice and crisp as the roast cooks, a little bit brown, a little bit burned, and it'll add a nice flavor. And then I'm going to put the only seasoning that I recommend for prime rib. I really like the flavor, so I don't usually add things like rosemary or oregano or any of the other spices that you would normally put on prime rib. I just like salt and pepper on mine, and then I enjoy the taste of the rib. Okay, so we're about ready to put this in the oven, but first I want to describe a little bit of the method that we're using that makes this really simple to do. Okay, so the method we're going to use today is one I call warm, sear, roast, and rest. Those are the steps that really guarantee an almost perfect prime rib roast. Okay, so the first step is to warm up your meat. That is, you want to take it out of your refrigerator and let it come to room temperature. This may take an hour or several hours depending on the temperature of your kitchen and the temperature of the meat. That'll allow for even cooking from edge to edge in this in the prime rib roast. Okay. The next step is called sear, and that is putting your meat into a 450-degree oven for 15 minutes, and that 15 minutes happens pretty much without regard to the size of the roast. The next step is to go ahead and roast your prime rib, and that's in a 325-degree oven, and the amount of time you roast it for is based on the size of your roast. For each pound that your roast is, you'd want to use 15 minutes of cook time. So if you had a 2-pound roast, that would be 30 minutes. A 4-pound roast would be an hour, and so on. And then after that time, you want to take the roast out of the oven and you want to let it rest The reason you want to let it rest is those juices are building up pressure inside that roast. And if you were to cut it right away, all those juices would run out along with the flavor and moistness of your meat. By letting it rest about 20 to 30 minutes, all those juices are redistributed out through the meat, and then each slice of prime will be flavorful and delicious. The other thing I want to point out is that about 15 to 20 minutes before you think you're done roasting, it's a good idea to use a food thermometer and make sure that the meat is not getting ahead of you. Different ovens have different recovery times, different cook times, even at the same amount of temperature and meat size. So it's a good idea to go ahead and check it about 15 or so minutes before you think it's done cooking to make sure the meat isn't getting ahead of you. And then if you like your prime rib medium rare like I do, then you're going to shoot to take that prime rib out of the oven when the internal temperature is somewhere between about 112 and 117 degrees. When you take the meat out and let it rest, the temperature is going to continue to rise 5 or 10 degrees. And so at the end of that 30-minute period, you should have a perfectly cooked medium rare prime rib. Okay, here we go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set our oven temperature to 450 degrees. And we're going to really give it time to go ahead and heat up. This is a pretty big roast, and it's in a pretty big pan, and it's a metal pan, so it's probably going to reduce the temperature. So we want to ensure that all the components of the oven are really hot, and that 450 degrees is not just the temperature of the air, but all the surrounding metal and racks and so on are also up at 450 degrees. All right, the timer's gone off. The oven has been heating up for quite some time, so it's time for us to move the roast into the oven. And we're going to go ahead and set our timer for 15 minutes. So it's 15 minutes at 450, and then we're going to turn it down to 325 for 99 minutes. Okay, so 15 minutes have passed, so we're going to reduce our oven temperature to 325. And I'm going to set our timer. Remember, we said 99 minutes, and I'm going to remove about 20 minutes from that so I can check it with my thermometer. So I'm going to put it to 1 hour and 20 minutes. And we'll wait for that timer to go off, and then we'll go ahead and check. Okay, so we just passed our 1 hour and 20 minute mark, which, as you'll recall, we probably have another 20 minutes to go on this. But just to be sure, we're going to go ahead and use our thermometer to check the internal temperature to see how close it is to our target of 115 to 120. If we don't want to go over, and because there's nothing worse than overcooked rib roast. But no, we're good. We are at 100 degrees right now. Maybe rising up to about 108. So we are probably right on schedule. So we're going to go ahead and put this back in for another, I guess we'll make it 15 minutes. And then we'll check it again, and it should be right where we need it to be. Okay, good. All right. So that's been 15 minutes. Let's give it a check. We're looking for a temperature right around 115, 120. Probably 120 is what we're looking for. Let's see what we got here. This will tell us if we need a little more time or if we're good to go. And we are coming in right at 118? Yeah, 118. So I'm going to go 10 more minutes with this. As I said, each oven cooks differently, and each rib was a different temperature when it goes into the oven. So you need to make these slight changes. Normally it would come out in 5 minutes, but I'm going to add 5 more minutes to that. So we're going to go for 10. Okay, there's our timer. So we are at 100 and 5 minutes, and we should have a perfectly cooked prime rib. Let's give it a poke and see what we've got. Beautiful. Right up to 121. You see how quickly that goes? That's why you can't really let it rest. You need to do it a few seconds at a time. All right, let's see if we can transfer this to our plate. Right there. Boy, that looks nice. Nice and brown. Got the crust on top. Put this here. And we're going to tent this with foil. And we're going to let that sit for about 30 minutes. In the meantime, that's going to get right up here to around 140. And that'll be about medium rare. While we're waiting, we're going to go ahead and make the Juliet. Let's see, there's a little bit of fat in here. So I think I'll probably pour some of that off. All right. Okay, so I just finished roasting the beef, and I was planning to make a Juliet. So what I did was I added some onion trimmings to the bottom of the pan when I began the roast. And now I'm going to add 2 cups of beef stock, and I'm going to use that to deglaze the pan. Now, this is a non-stick pan, so I'm going to use a plastic tool so I don't do any damage to the finish or any damage to the sauce either. Oh, and that's coming right off. This is going to be great. All right. All right. So the heat is on medium-high, and that should loosen up anything that's left on the bottom. And all those brown bits will add flavor. This is going to be wonderful. All right, I'm going to take a taste of this, see how we're doing with seasoning. Okay, perfect. All right, so now what I have here is a tablespoon of red wine, a tablespoon of beef stock, and a tablespoon of tomato ketchup. I like to put a tomato product in my gravies, for beef anyway. And this is about a tablespoon of cornstarch, and that's going to be our thickening agent, and it's going to give it not a whole lot of thickening. We just are looking for something that would coat the back of a spoon. You don't want it to be a thick gravy like it would be for a pot roast. For prime rib au jus, the Juliet should be just a little bit of a thickness to it, not a whole lot. So we're going to go ahead and mix that in. All right, and that is about perfect. All right. There is a little bit of a dome to this roast pan, so we're not getting the quite the contact I'm looking for, so I'm going to shift it over to the side here. All right, and that is about done. Yep, that looks about where I want it. Now, if you prefer it a little thicker, you can add more cornstarch. You could boil it down for a few minutes. There's a number of ways to do it, but I kind of like it like that. So now I'm going to go ahead and strain this into a saucepan, and that'll be ready to go in another 15 or 20 minutes or so when our prime rib is ready for slicing and eating. Okay, all right, so this prime rib has been resting for about 30 minutes. It should be perfectly ready to cut. So let's see what we can do here. First thing I'm going to do is cut off this little piece of fat here, which is probably very crispy and kind of tasty in small quantities. And now some people would cut the bones off, but I like to just leave them right where they are. And let's see what it looks like when we cut into this. Oh yeah, this is beautiful. Okay, look at this. Oh my gosh. That is just about all I could hope for. And if we turn it around and take a look, that's like a perfect medium rare. Now as you get to the center, it'll be slightly more rare. And then outs to the edge would be a little bit more toward cooked. So let's go ahead and put some Julienne on this. All right, so there you have prime ribs of beef au jus with boiled potatoes, and another hack of ours, green beans casserole with fresh mixed vegetables. Give it a try. I'm sure you'll love it for your holiday meal.